On this episode of Finding 44, 11-year NBA veteran Scot Pollard opens up about his own life-saving transplant experience and how he's now using his journey to impact others. His oversized heart and towering frame aren't the only things that are larger than life, and I appreciate Scot being so raw, honest, and transparent in our conversation, including his very entertaining answer to his spirit animal.
Through his own experiences of loss, caretaking, and personal health crises, Scot has turned heartache into hope by lending his name in support of the Pearls of Life Foundation, dedicated to advocating for and supporting families through organ donation. Leading into the foundation's inaugural fundraiser gala, we're so grateful he was able to take this time with us. Listeners, Scot Pollard, Champion for Change.
Scot, it is so great to see you and have you on the podcast. I want to jump right in because this has been the last, year and a half for you of your life has been such a journey. And with your heart transplant, how has that just impacted your perspective and how you live your life every day?
I got to back you up even further because 2019, I'd like to give my wife credit for starting this health issue that we've been having in our household. In 2019, she was diagnosed with breast cancer at a routine mammogram because she turned 40. And they discovered it, and they got very nervous very quickly. It was 11 centimeters in a breast duct. And they thought, oh no, that is huge. There's no way it hasn't spread. And so we panicked, and we went to the doctor, and they did surgery. And miraculously, surgery took care of everything. She did not need chemo. She did not need radiation. But it obviously shook us to our core, shook our relationship to our core. I was a caregiver. I was the one for a very, very short time. Again, it was just surgery and recovery, but it was surgery. It was not just, there's no such thing as a routine surgery. She had a double mastectomy, and they put implants back in, because they took everything. They were very worried that it had spread, so they took everything. The lymph nodes, there's no tissue left. So they just wanted to be sure because it was so large to begin with, and ultimately it just ended up being contained, and everything was okay. But that was my turn to be caregiver. She's always the rock of this family. She's always the one that gets everything done. And so with her out of commission, I had to take over those duties and do this and do that with the kids. And, it's a caregiver's thing. I can't list it all off because it's just endless when you have a family and you have a household to maintain. And so that started us on that, oh God, are we going to let this hard time, this adversity tear us apart? Or are we going to get closer? And we got a lot closer. It worked really well from that regard because we both had the mindset of, really? What else are we going to do? The old for better or worse, right? And so it really brought us closer together. And then 2 years later, I had my annual heart check in January of 2021. Because my dad died on the heart transplant list in 1991, it had always been a concern of mine. And so I always kept the heart checkup on my list every year. During the NBA, it was great. In fact, they started mandating them in 2003, about halfway through my career, because an NBA player died in his sleep, Jason Collier, from a heart issue. And so they started screening the NBA players. But I'm not going to go into that because the NBA won't release the information.
It's a conversation for a completely second podcast.
Anyway, they started doing that. And then after my career was over, I kept doing it because of my family issues. And shortly after my career ended, I had two siblings. I'm the youngest of six that went into heart failure at different times, but in their about 46 years old, they each had a situation and they went into heart failure. One's a male and one's a female. And so, obviously that kept on my mind. So January, I got mine and everything was great, just like always. Take a breath. Doctors, there's this thing called COVID out there. You should really get a COVID shot. I said, nah, I'm not going to do that. Well, you should at least get a flu shot because it'll protect you in case you get COVID. I said, I'm not really worried about it. And the last time I got a flu shot was when I got traded from the Detroit Pistons to the Atlanta Hawks. And part of my physical was they gave me a flu shot. Well, was the lockout season. It was the spring of '99. Got a flu shot. I got so sick that I couldn't leave my hotel room because I was just there. Like they traded me. I didn't have anywhere to live, so I was living in a hotel. I couldn't leave my hotel room for a week. Well, that was all of training camp during that short season. I got back and they cut me. So I never got a flu shot again because of that. I just thought, they don't agree with me. Or for whatever flu shots, whatever's in them, it's not me. So I still was fighting back with my doctors. They said, well, this COVID thing, we just don't know what's going to happen. So they scared me into getting a flu shot. Well, 2 days later, I got a virus and attacked my heart and it caused heart failure. And that's what started my journey, was a flu shot. And so, you can go back and say, God, I wish I hadn't done that, and regret and all of those things. But the fact of the matter is my doctors were doing what they thought was the right thing for me. I did what I thought was the right thing for me. I made the choice. No one put a gun to my head. And it did that. Now, I was 46 at the time. That's why I mentioned my siblings. They were 46. My dad got a virus in his late 40s, we know of, caused his heart failure. He died at 54. So it could be just that at 46, something happens to a Pollard and it releases this genetic issue. I may have gotten it anyway, even without the flu shot. So I can't just kick myself and kick the doctors for talking me into getting a flu shot. So I'm in heart failure. Can't walk across the room. My heart's beating 10,000 extra beats a day. Every day I'm sleeping, I'm breathing like I'm running uphill. I'm exhausted all the time. Can't remember a thing in my head. I'm forgetting conversations. I wouldn't have been talking like this a year and 2 months ago, right before transplant. I couldn't talk like this. I would have forgotten what I was talking about, first of all. And second of all, I would have had to stop because I was out of breath, because my heart was just fluttering. It wasn't pumping like this. It was just fluttering. And the cardiologist, he used that exact motion with his hand. He said, most people's heart beats like this. Yours is kind of doing this. Well, that's really hit me hard in the chest and the brain, because I remember being in the cardiologist's office with my dad, and the cardiologist said that it literally did the exact same thing. He said, your heart's not pumping. It's kind of just fluttering. And I was like, when my cardiologist did the same thing, I was like, oh no. So 3 years of awful medications, 3 years of 3 ablations up at the University of Chicago. I had a team here at St. Vincent's watching me. I had a team at the University of Chicago watching me because my cardiologist that's a friend of mine, Jordan Shin from Boston, who had kept tabs on me throughout my retirement years, he knew somebody at the University of Chicago. So I went up there for ablations, and the ablations were how we discovered that it was most likely a genetic issue. Because if it had just been the virus, an ablation is where they put a wire in through your groin and they go up to your heart and they burn. It's a short circuit. All of my problems with my heart, just sorry to backtrack. People are like, oh, what'd you eat? What'd you do? It wasn't a lifestyle thing. I've always been healthy. I have no plumbing issues. My cholesterol is perfect. I get my blood checked all the time. It's always been perfect. My dad's cholesterol was perfect. He weighed 380 pounds, but he was 6'9". I'm 6'11", I'm 315 pounds. People go, no, you're not. We're big. So we never had any plumbing issues. My siblings don't have any plumbing issues. This is all electrical for all of us. And so they're thinking, oh, there's a short circuit. We'll just fry it. They burn a piece of your heart. Problem solved. That's for most people. And most people that have something like AFib, it works. They fry that short circuit, goes away, boom, they're good. And then sometimes they come back and people will get a second, maybe even a third ablation, but it works. Mine, they said it was like whack-a-mole. They'd zap it, another one would pop up. Zap that one, another one would pop up. That's how they knew it was genetic in my case, because it wouldn't go away. I think the longest I went in between ablations was 10 months. That one actually kind of worked for a while, even though the PVCs, the post-ventricular contractions, they kept going. But they were lessened by that second ablation. Third ablation was in there for 8 hours, and that one took me about a month in bed. I was in bed after that one for about a month. I was like, I'm not doing that again. There's no more ablations for me. That almost killed me. And the doctor even said that. He came out and talked to my wife right after that one and said, there's nothing else to do. I'm going to kill him. So he just said, I've never put that much heat on anybody. I've never been that intense. I've never taken that long. And he goes, I can't get it. It's just, I'll kill him. So 6 months later, after I was recovered and we tried every single drug, I tried drugs. One of them, they said they hadn't used it since the 70s because it was killing people. And I tried another one. The first side effect was death. I'm not joking. The first side effect was death. I was like, all right. Tried one that came in a glass bottle. You know, plastic is usually, this one, they were like, it comes in glass. I'm like, why? The pharmacy had to order it. I had to wait a week for the pharmacy to like find someone that had this drug.
It has to be like some sort of science experiment, right? When it like is coming in like a glass tube.
Absolutely. I was like, oh, yeah, see, we're going to try this old medicine. It's got alcohol in it. It's good for you with the cocaine.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I'm trying stuff they haven't done in 100 years. So, yeah, they didn't work. So, in September of 23, Dr. Chowdhury, my cardiologist at St. Vincent's here, he said, we got to start talking about transplant. Of course, that word comes up, and I thought, well, I'm going to die, just like my dad on the transplant list, because I'm too big to get a heart. That's what they told my dad, because in 1991, your donor had to be your size. The doctor very obviously and honestly said, anybody with a heart that'll pump your body also has a bad heart. They're not going to be a healthy person. 380 pounds is too much. So make your final preparations. And so luckily, Dr. Chowdhury, as blunt and as honest as he is, which I very much appreciate about him, he had hope. He told me it's not over. I mean, we can transplant you. But he was also very honest, and the surgeon at St. Vincent's was also very honest. As I was going through the transplant process to get listed at St. Vincent's, they said, get listed at as many places as possible. And so I got listed at the University of Chicago because I had a team there. So I got listed here first. They put me as a status 4, which is the highest status you can be without being hospitalized. Stage 3, you got to have a pump of some sort, and you cannot be hospitalized, but you have to have something that you wear around, like an LVAD. And then stage 2 or 1, you're in the hospital. And so I wasn't that sick yet, so they didn't hospitalize me. Dr. Chowdhury said, live your life, but if you get worse, we'll keep checking and we may have to put you in. Went up to the University of Chicago the next month in January of 24 and went through their testing to get listed. And then I was getting tired. I came home for the weekend with plans to go to Vanderbilt, which is in Nashville, and got the call from my cardiologist up in Chicago. So I just got the data from Indiana. And he said, if I had this while you were here, I might have kept you. He said, it's not bad enough that I'm going to make you turn around and come back, but I'm going to be watching you close, because if I had this data, I probably would have just kept you here, because I'd gone downhill in a month, because I got listed in December of 23. And then this is 4 weeks later, it's January. And he's like, I don't like the way it's trending. So I wait the weekend. I go down to Nashville on Sunday. Monday, I had 8 appointments, which is normal. That's what you do. You're meeting people, you're doing blood and giving blood, and they're doing echoes and all this stuff. And by the end of the day, I was pretty tired. Try not to cry on this one. I'm talking to myself. The next morning, I woke up and it was the worst of my life. I didn't want to get out of bed. That was the first time in my life I ever quit. I didn't want to go. I was like, done. I'm done. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of feeling like this. Sorry. And I said, my wife was with me, and I was just like, I can't do it. I'm exhausted. She said, get your ass up. I'm going to get you a wheelchair. So she did. We got to the hospital. She got me a wheelchair. I swallowed my pride again, and I had many times over those 3 years of heart failure. And she wheeled me around like an old man, got me to my first appointment, which was the surgeon at Vanderbilt. And his name's Dr. Shaw. And he looked at me, he said, how you feeling? And I told him, and he said, yeah, you don't look very good. I'm done with you. Go to your next appointment. The next appointment, well, behind my back, he called the cardiologist and said, he doesn't look good. Go to his next appointment. So the cardiologist walked in my next appointment, which was supposed to be a treadmill test. They were going to check my O2 levels on a treadmill. And the cardiologist walked in, and this is direct quote, so I apologize if you need to edit, but he looked at me and he said, "You look like shit. I'm keeping you." That was it. Very professional medical term, but Dr. Menachem pulls no punches. And he said, I'm keeping you. And so that was the beginning of me being hospitalized. That was February 6, 24. And they listed me as a status 2E, the E being for the exception for my height, because I'm the tallest person that's ever been transplanted. And I'm an O positive, so the most common, or one of the most common blood types. So you're competing with a lot of hearts there. As you guys know, in the donation business, there's a lot of compatibility issues. And so when you're the O positive, it's like, yeah, there's a whole lot of people that are also needing a heart in that category. So luckily, Vanderbilt also is a record-setting program. I was number 16 transplant of 174 last year. They set a world record. And that's why St. Vincent's and the University agreed that Vanderbilt was the place. Because St. Vincent's, I think that year, 2024, did about 28 heart transplants. I think University of Chicago did about 50, somewhere in there. And so just Vanderbilt's volume, their facilities, and just the amount of surgeons and cardiologists and the people they have, it just gives them the ability to attract more unique cases like me. And that's why everybody agreed that, they were honest. The egos involved at St. Vincent's, there could have been egos involved at University of Chicago, where they said, no, you're staying here until we get you a heart. Well, when I got my heart, I got it. My first one was actually at 6 days. My first offer, it was actually going to be on my birthday, February 12th. And they said, watch the Super Bowl, which was on the 11th last year. No food after midnight. You're getting a heart tomorrow. I was like, on my birthday? Wow. So my kids came down to say hello and potentially goodbye. So all four of my kids were there, and we hugged and all that. And then we just kept waiting and waiting and waiting. And then finally, about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they called and said this. But don't eat yet. We have another one. About 15 minutes later, called, go ahead and have some food. This one's not going to work either. So huge letdown, a lot of tears. We were real excited, and the story was beautiful. It was going to be on my birthday, all that. But, very glad that, again, the technology they have, they were able to decide this heart wasn't the right one for me. It wouldn't have been. So it ended up being another, from the 12th to the 4 days. And the right heart was available. And I ended up getting transplanted on the 10-day wait, which was a miracle. For anybody my size. Obviously there isn't anybody else my size that's ever been transplanted. So a lot of miracles happened. My donor was hospitalized on February 2nd, a few days before me, with lung issues that had been happening to him quite a bit, and he finally got a pneumonia that he just couldn't kick. And they approached the family about becoming a donor, and they agreed. They said this is what he would have wanted. He was a great man and loved everybody. And so he became my hero, and 4 other people as well.
Wow.
Casey Angel is his name. Yes, his last name is Angel.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
You can believe that.
Scott, walk us through what are some of those criteria for when the doctors are saying this is not the heart for you, or it's not the right match. What are those variables? Because
of my unique situation, they asked me, they educated me on the different hearts that couldn't become available. I checked off the boxes for anything, including high-risk hearts. That includes people that might be in a high-risk occupation, like emergency room doctor or prisoner, and anything in between, because you're exposed to whatever. You might have hepatitis, you might have AIDS, you might have a drug problem or whatever. I was like, check the box. I don't care. I'll take any heart, because they educated me and said, we can manage anything. AIDS isn't going to be easy, but we can manage it if that's what your heart has. So I was like, I'll take it. So there's that. The size was the biggest thing. They said you could go with somebody maybe as small as 6'3".
Wow.
Small.
Yeah.
6'3",
yeah.
Which is still way above average. So that was a limitation. And again, luckily, Casey was a big man. And so, there was that. There was my blood type. But yeah, there's people that say, I'm not sick enough. I don't want to take one of the high risk hearts. I don't want to have to deal with hepatitis or AIDS or whatever after my transplant. But I was like, I gotta take any chance I can get because of my size. I don't want to die.
Yeah.
Which was a very realistic possibility for me.
Scott, take us through. So obviously, you spent probably almost all of your life as a highly competitive athlete, a highly successful athlete, professional athlete, and used to being able to have a body that did what you asked it to do or what you made it do. Able to get up and work through 2-a-days in college or 4-a-days after that, or, the grueling training and practice and travel schedule and competition and all the things. Talk to us about, being that professional competitor, and, let's throw Survivor into the mix here too, which is ironic. I'm sure you've heard a million times in the past year you were on Survivor, but that, how that experience and that persona as a professional athlete played into your experience as a patient, as while you were sick and also in recovery.
It definitely worked against me while I was sick in heart failure because my dumb athlete brain kept thinking, oh, I'm fine. I don't need this medication. I don't need to go to the doctor. I don't need this. I just need to rest a little bit. It'll come back. And so it worked against me at times where I would not listen very well to my doctor's advice and take it easy. And I would push that heart. And then that heart would tell me very clearly, you done messed up, hey, Ron. And I'd be on the bed for a month. And so I couldn't push that heart anymore. And it wasn't clear to me how badly that my heart was doing because I just kept thinking, I just need a rest. I'm fine. If I rest, I'll come back. Athlete brain. I've done lots of horrible things to my body, as you said, Chrissy, to become an athlete, to be a professional athlete. I've always been in shape. I've always gotten up. No sleep, no food. Who cares? Puked in a trash can, go. It doesn't matter. You just push. If you have that, you have it. That's why athletes make terrible gamblers, and Vegas loves them because they don't know when to quit. And so it wasn't clear to me how bad I was until they pulled the tube out after surgery. And I took a breath of air and the fog was gone. And I sang a stupid song for the first time in a long time, because that's kind of my thing. I walk around the house, I make up words to songs. And so they pulled the tube out and I said, I left my heart in San Fran, Nashville. And that's the first thing I said after my heart transplant. And that's exactly the moment that I knew that I did not have much longer. I would not have made it another month, I don't think, because how I felt before and how I felt after, I really was going downhill very fast. And so it was a very liberating and happy moment, but it was also a very sad and sombering moment because my athlete brain almost killed me. Because I just kept thinking, no, I don't. I'm fine. I don't need all this. I don't need a transplant. I will get better. And so I was lucky that the doctors took over and my wife took over and said, no, dummy, you're going in.
I would think, though, one of the things in an advantage to being a professional athlete, playing more than a decade in the NBA, is that you do know your body really, really well. Like, you typically know when something might be off. Like, you might power through it, but you have that indication of, when something isn't quite where it should be. And then you also, you mentioned as you were going through the process, flu shots and this and that things, they were suggesting how you were advocating for yourself along the way. And, maybe you were more comfortable perhaps in some of those situations because you have done that. You've been in front of so many doctors and athletic trainers over your career where you're able to be more vocal. What have you learned through this process with your wife's cancer diagnosis, with your heart transplant, just about the importance of advocating for yourself or listening to yourself for those patients who, might be experiencing something, but hesitant to take the necessary action that could save their lives?
That's really it, is when when you're not telling your doctor everything, they can't know and they can't give you the right advice. So, giving them half truths when they ask you a question, you can lie to yourself, you can lie to your psychiatrist, you can lie to your spouse if that's your thing, but you can't lie to your doctor because they're going to find out through blood work or the lack of information you give them gives them a different path of how to treat you. And all of a sudden you're being treated for something that maybe you don't have or they think is happening because they got a blood test back and they're like, hey, you said you don't drink alcohol, but your liver is not doing well, just throwing out an example. And so you just have to. I don't care how you feel about your lifestyle or your habits or whatever it is. Like, you can't go in there and say, I don't smoke. And then all of a sudden they look at your lungs and you've got fibrosis in your lungs, So there's all kinds of reasons to, yes, advocate for yourself by being honest with yourself and saying, hey, do I actually want to get better? Because if you're in there trusting a doctor or get a second opinion. If you don't like the way the doctor is talking to you or whatever, do get a second opinion. I had 3 teams, plus my friend that's cardiologist. They were all talking to each other. And so I felt like I had the best in the world, and I did have the best in the world looking out for me. And that's just because I'm fortunate to have stayed friends with so many people that I've met in different cities that I got traded to, this and that. Those people saved my life because I just made friendships. So advocating second is one thing, but also, honestly, if you're going to go the doctor route, listen to them. Or don't go. If you're going to go in and lie to the doctor, just don't bother. Don't go. Just live your life then. And that's fine too, if that's the way you want to roll. Like, I'm going holistic. I'm just going to see if I can fix this heart failure with some weeds and berries. Fine, go for it, but don't lie about it and say you don't have it. I think that with my wife especially, it was hard. You think I'm stubborn. It was hard for her to listen to the doctors and say, I need surgery. Yeah, she was saying goodbye to a part of her womanhood. Mm-hmm. And that was very difficult for her to say goodbye. They took everything. Like I said, she's, there's no tissue left at all. And so she felt very de-womanized. And, that was hard for her to get over, even with implants back and they tattooed, nipples back on there. But it was hard for her. And so that was, advocating for herself post-surgery was difficult. Because again, she's asking for help. She's never asked for help in her life. She's worked since she was a teenager, and she's always taken care of herself. She's never needed anybody else, and she certainly doesn't need me. Don't tell her that.
Well, hopefully she will be listening at some point.
Oops. Don't leave me.
I think that's really, really important. And I wondered too, you talked about your dad and your siblings who had, obviously losing your dad at such a young age and experiencing that as a son and also a member of a family who is kind of plagued with whatever the condition, ultimately ended up being. How did that loss of your dad and obviously, in the establishment of technically your wife's foundation, he's honored there. Talk to us about how your dad's loss and experience kind of stayed with you through your own and how he is a part of it now.
My dad's name was Pearl Ison Pollard Jr., and he had 5 sons and didn't pass on that handle. I'm really mad at him for that, really.
Did you pass it on to any of your kids? You didn't either.
So, well, it wasn't my name. But true story, when he died, I was 16, and I signed with Kansas about a year later, and then I became 18, and I went to go change my name to Pearl Ison Pollard III. And someone at the University of Kansas talked me out of it. And I don't remember the name, which is fine because I don't want to call anybody out. But bottom line is I was talked out of it because they said it would be tough because I'd have to remove my scholarship and then they'd have to apply for a new one. And then, yes, one of my kids would have been Pearl Ison Pollard IV. What we did do is our youngest, he's named after both of his grandpas because my wife's dad passed away a long time ago too. He had pancreatic cancer, and I never met Robert. But Ison is my fourth kid's name. That's my dad's middle name. And then his middle name is Robert after his grandfather on his maternal side. So he's got the double banger there with the grandpa names. So if he doesn't like Ison, he can go by Robert when he gets older.
Ison's awesome, though. Like,
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that name.
Yeah.
huge.
My dad passing away at the age of 16, I actually quit basketball. I was going into my junior year, and he died in October, late October, so we were just about to start hoops, and I quit. I was like, I'm done. And I'd been doing some dumb stuff as a kid, and I was growing up in San Diego. I was a surfer kid. I loved the ocean. Didn't love school very much. I hung out with all kinds of people. I wasn't just a jock, so I was doing all kinds of stuff, and not a lot of it was positive in my life. It wasn't taking me anywhere. And then I quit basketball because my dad died. Well, for about 2 weeks there, I went completely insane and realized I needed an outlet for all the anger I had in my soul. And so that was basketball. It became my outlet. I still played volleyball in the spring because volleyball is an indoor sport at high school in San Diego. And that was my passion. I loved volleyball, but basketball became my passion after my dad died. And I was the smilingest dude on the basketball court, I think, in the history of the game. And that was my mask. I was always angry. I never lost that. I'm still angry to this day. And so when I smile, it's that. It's either smile or get angry, and so I smile. But it was my fuel. That was the thing. That anger drove me to get up when I didn't want to get up, to run harder when I didn't want to run harder, and all of that stuff that makes you a successful athlete, that drive. And so that was it. That pushed me. That anger pushed me to be great, as great as I could be as a basketball player, and probably play through injuries I should not have played through, because I probably would have had a longer career if I had rested at the right moments when I had certain injuries. But it just wasn't in me. I was like, oh, my hand's broken. That's all right. I'm going to just keep playing. I'm not going to miss any games. I'm playing well right now, so just tape it up. And so, not that that's really debilitating in basketball. You can play with one hand as long as you can catch.
Not recommended, I wouldn't say.
No, I'm not saying it was awesome. I'm just saying, feet, ankles. I rolled my ankles a lot more than people know, than my trainers knew. They'd be like, well, your ankle's pretty swollen today. I was like, yeah, just tape it up. Shh, stop talking. And so, there was all that. But again, those are things that in my head you just did. You just played through injury. Whereas nowadays, nobody plays through injury. They have 20-year careers. What is this? So, yeah. It's just a different mindset, and I was in that mindset. But the charity came about. My wife, after my transplant, she was like, look, you've always been paid to do these appearances. You've always been paid to give speeches to corporations or this or that. We travel to golf tournaments and they'll fly us out and all that. She said, what if you're spreading the word about organ donation? And I'll start a charity with our friend Dave Sider. And she did. And so she named it after my dad, Pearl. And it's called Pearls of Life because an organ is the pearl of life that you're giving to somebody else. And so I think it was a beautiful name and very honoring of my father. And I'm just a volunteer spokesman, I should say. And I didn't want to be involved in the paperwork of it. I didn't want to be involved in the day-to-day grind of it because I'm better at this kind of thing as opposed to voting on stuff or being in there going, hey, we should approve this for the charity. Like, you guys talk, you guys do that. I'll just go solicit people. And so that's what I do. I'm not getting paid for anything, but anytime that anybody wants to have me, be there at a speech or a golf tournament or whatever, we're just asking that somebody makes a donation to the charity so that the charity can get me there. It does pay for my travel and accommodations. We've been to San Diego and spoken on a panel in January of this year. In February of this year, in April of this year, I'm going to speak at the International Heart and Lung Transplant Conference, which is thousands of doctors from all over the world. Last year's was in Prague. This year's is in Boston. I was like, hey, call me back when you're in Prague. I've never been there. I've been to Boston. And they said, you know why we want you in Boston, right? I was like, I don't know. Is it because the Celtics? But yeah, so that's the function of the charity, but mostly it is to educate about organ donation, dispel the myths around organ donation, and hopefully the charity gets to a point soon where it is able to help people that have to travel for transplant like we did. When it's just you and a caregiver, when it's, a husband and a wife or husband, wife and wife, whatever, just the two of you, they do have hospitality houses at transplant centers like Vanderbilt, like St. Vincent's, like University of Chicago. And you can share a bed, and then you're sharing a kitchen with some other people, more tolerable. But when you have a family, let's say you're traveling with your child who needs a transplant and they have siblings, that scenario doesn't work for you. It didn't work for us. We had young kids. We don't fit in one bed in one room. Plus, we're all giants. So we needed space. So we had to rent an apartment across the street from the hospital, out of pocket. We spent a lot of money. The transplant, my insurance has covered over $2 million for my transplant. Heart transplants are not cheap. No transplant is cheap. Mine's over $2 million and counting. And that doesn't cover the travel. They were like, oh, we'll reimburse you up to $10,000, my old insurance company. And they got to about $3,000. And then the rest of it, they were like, oh, we need more documentation. I was like, I sent you the rental contract. I sent you this. I sent you that. I sent you this. We need more. And so never got reimbursed. So it's expensive. So that's another function of the charity. Hopefully it gets to a point. And that's why the charity is having a launch party on March 22nd. It's coming up here soon. You can get tickets at pearlsoflife.org. Click the events tab. It's at Lucas Estate. It's got open bar. Please drink responsibly, but irresponsibly enough that you bid high on the auction items.
But tell your doctor about it, about your consumption.
But be on your consumption with your doctor the next week.
Yeah.
My doctor, Dr. Chowdhury, will be there. He's going to give a little speech. Dave Sider, who's the treasurer for the charity, he's going to give a speech. My wife, Dawn Pollard, is going to give a speech. She's the president of the charity.
She probably does feel like a doctor at this point. You probably both do because of the amount of information and how much you've learned. You basically each have like honorary PhDs.
It's an unfortunate side effect of surgery is you start learning. We know way more about breast cancer and heart transplants than we ever cared to know.
I love the kind of that mission around the education and dispelling myths. That's a huge anchor of what Project 44 aims to do too, and especially in bone marrow donation. I mean, there's just so many old antiquated ideas about what it is and isn't. We are eager to fill the vacuum with current medical information and science. What are some of the most common myths and misinformation that you find yourself confronting when you're at these engagements?
I can tell you right off the bat, the first one hurt a lot. Someone very, very close to me said, well, you just used ESPN to get higher on the transplant list. ESPN's filming a documentary about my heart transplant, and it's coming out on E60, it's coming out on Father's Day. It's an E60, one of their series. But someone very close to me said that hurt a lot. That first of all, they would assume I would do that. Second of all, that's even legal. And it comes from a place of ignorance. So it gave me a chance to educate. It gave me a chance to say, hey, this is actually what they do. They take your data. They take how sick you are. They take where you are. They take your age. They take, if you have a caregiver, if you have a support system, because if you can't get to the appointments post-transplant, you're not a great candidate. They need positive results. They're not going to give an organ to somebody that's going to have a failure. They want somebody that's going to be able to be at those appointments, get the medication in their system, and have somebody that helps remind them to take that medication whenever it needs to be taken. And so caregivers are so important to have. Vanderbilt required 2. So in case my wife couldn't be there, I had to sign up a friend too. And luckily I had a friend here in Indiana sign up, Brent Joseph, very good friend of mine. And he signed up. He's like, yeah, I'll get you And so he did actually one time, because it was just to give my wife a break, but he swapped out and came down to Nashville while she came up here and just spent one day alone, and then she went back. But there's so many myths that require education. My wife wasn't a donor. She thought it was weird. She thought it was creepy, and she didn't want people rooting around in her body when she passed. But she's sitting in the hospital in Nashville in February of 2024, and she's like, she signed up, and then I did. I was like, well, there's certain things they can't use for me because I'm a transplant patient myself, but I have a whole lot of skin. That's my biggest organ, and it's bigger than anybody else's. There's a whole lot. Now, there might be a kid with a cool tattoo on his arm because it's my skin. I've got a lot of ink on me, but I might help somebody live a better life when I pass because of my skin donation. So there's all kinds of things. You can be a living donor. I'm not sure that I'm even able to be a living donor because of the drugs that are in my system. I don't know if I can donate bone marrow. I've had permanent lenses put in my eyes, but they can still take the cornea from back there, and there's other parts of my eye they can use. And you can still there's a myth, can't have an open casket if you've been an organ donor. Yes, you can. Absolutely. Your eyes are closed. Nobody has an open casket, open eye funeral. You're not staring at the people coming by. Hey,
oh my gosh. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Good to see you. And so, everything's covered. They go through your torso and they'll harvest skin. You're wearing clothes in a casket. So you can absolutely have an open casket. I could go down, spend another episode talking about all the myths. But I'm also, again, I'm happy to have been asked. I'm going to speak. Don and I are actually both going to speak at Carmel High School next week in March, and to talk about this, to talk about the myths, because the health class teacher was like, yeah, there's so many kids that just, they just need to know. We're not trying to talk them into it, but they come in and they say, oh, yeah, well, you could just sell your organ, or if you have enough money, you could just buy an organ. Obviously, because of my social media presence, people are assuming that I just bought an organ. And so, you have to educate people like, hey, it doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter who you are. Steve Jobs had to wait on a transplant list. And the only reason he was able to get one is because he had an airplane on standby. He flew all the way across the country. As soon as they called him, he got in his private jet, flew all the way across the country to get to his organ that he got. And he still passed away. And that's one of the richest people in the history of the world. And again, he had to follow the rules. He was on a transplant list, and the only reason he got an organ was because he was sick enough to qualify. They don't take in your income. They don't take your race. They don't take your social status, whatever. It doesn't matter if you're an NBA player or if you're someone that's just working a quote unquote regular job. So there's all kinds of those things that it's about education. It's about letting people know that you can be an organ donor. You can be someone's hero. You can save lives. You can help people live better lives. And it costs you nothing. And it doesn't cost them anything, because if they're a candidate to get it, no one's taking any money. The hospitals are just earning money to do what they do, which is to save lives. But other than that, no one's getting any money to get your organs, or they're not letting you die. Oh, that's a big one. They're like, oh, the first responders won't save my life. How does a first responder know you're a donor? First of all. And second of all, if they're trying to just not let you live, if they let you expire there on the sidewalk, let's say you have a car wreck and a first responder shows up, they're like, oh, they're a donor. By the time you get to the hospital, if they let you die there, by the time you get to the hospital, you can't have your organs harvested. Your organs are dead, and they cannot be harvested after you decease. So that's one that's just, if you think about some of them for 5 seconds, it's very easy to think, oh, wait, yeah, that doesn't make sense. There's no way that a first responder would not save your life, because what are they going to do? Check your license before? Oh, donor, let's let him die. Oh, I checked his license. It's Scot Pollard. He's a donor. All right. Woo. Let him go. Don't do mouth to mouth. That's just, there's silliness. But again, it's about education. People don't say these things from a place of education. They say it from a place of ignorance. So happy to be able to dispel the myths, the rumors, and help educate people to make the decision. You don't have to. No one's putting a gun to your head and saying, hey, you should be a donor. I'm just saying, hey, if you would, please consider it. That would be wonderful, because the feeling that your family, we're going to meet the donor family, we're going to meet Casey's family in a couple weeks, and we can't wait. We've talked to them already. We're excited. They seem like great people. It seems like Casey was a great man, and we're very excited to meet him, and we're lucky. But we also know that this is very rare. Most people don't get to meet the donor family. And I completely understand why, some of those reasons. They lost somebody. They didn't lose somebody that was somebody that lived 95 years or 100 years and lived a long, full life. Most organ donors had their life cut short for whatever reason, and usually not a good one. So I completely understand the grieving process of why a family would not want to respond. I know a lot of people now, again, back to Larry, your allusion to like, I should have a doctor. Well, I know a lot of people have had transplants now too, and none of the people I've met have met their donor family or even talked to them or heard back from them. And they've all written letters. And so, but I completely understand why. So most people don't. So I appreciate how lucky I am that we get to go meet Casey's family and have a relationship with them. They have a 13-year-old son named William. His sister Megan has done a bunch of interviews already because of stories that have been done on me. She's like, I'm in, I'll do this. And so she's been doing great interviews with people nationwide, Sacramento and here in Indiana and Texas. And so they've done one for Vanderbilt in Tennessee. And so they've been great to deal with the media storm that comes with me and my promotion of organ donation. And they don't have to be a part of that. And I've told them from minute one, I was like, hey, you guys can say no at any time because it's a lot. Not everybody needs to be or wants to be in the spotlight. And they're like, we got it. We're just happy you're honoring Casey. So yeah. I love it.
That's amazing. On the Project 44 side, we find that so often, you mentioned that ignorance, and I don't think it's necessarily, it's not intentional, but death is not a comfortable subject, and especially relative to things that people don't have access to or don't understand, they have a tendency to just kind of throw their hands up and say, well, I don't know. I can't think about that. And so for us, we talk about inspiring a culture of yes. That is just a willingness to say, yeah, sure. Like you said, it's no skin off my back, or maybe it is, at the end of the day. But,
at the end of the day.
At the end of the day, yeah, it may be a lot of skin, but it doesn't cost me anything. It's not, going to put me out in any way. There are so many reasons to say yes. And if we can put that conversation on the mainstream and make it more accessible and familiar to people, we feel like their willingness and just ability, honestly, as humans to say, okay, yeah, I think I could do that. The chances just go higher and higher and higher the more visibility they have to it. I love Scott so much. You talked about the death of your father and the anger that you carried for so many years because of that, and how his legacy now has created a space filled with so much love with the foundation, and really just the incredible impact that you already have and will continue to make through that. So I'm just really love kind of that full circle story. The final thing that we wanted to talk with you about today, and we always ask our guests, and super excited to hear your answer on this. The moose is our spirit animal of Project 44, and Andrew Smith's nickname was the Moose, similar to you. Really large guy, big frame. He wore the number 44, so it's his antlers. Maybe a little bit of a different energy than you have, though, I think. So I have a feeling you already know what your spirit animal is for the reason, but if you don't, can you share that with us, please?
I don't think I've ever been asked what my spirit animal is before. Quick response was dragon, it doesn't exist because I talk a lot. So it's kind of like I'm breathing fire. I wish I could fly, but because dragons, my wife could answer this question probably really well, but I don't know, I guess because even if a dragon has good intentions, sometimes it might hurt somebody around it with its fire or its claws or its wings whacking at you or something. I don't know if that's the case, but yeah, I'm going with dragon. I have a dragon tattooed on my belly, so that it kind of came to my head. I was like, oh, dragon. All right.
I love it. Well, dragon is also like a protector, right? Like that's who you want, guarding the gates, right? That's you.
It's scary. You never know what's going to do.
Well, dragon, spirit animal, Scot Pollard in real life, and absolutely you are a force, and we really appreciate your taking the time so excited for what you and your family are doing with Pearls of Life, and that is going to impact so many people. Excited to follow, your story, your journey, the foundation, all of the contribution, and just grateful for all of the work that you are doing, within the donation community and their awareness that you're raising. So thank you so much, and look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Awesome. Thank you guys for having me on. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Finding 44. If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Follow Project 44's mission at project44.org and find us on social media at Join Project 44.